1972 Carlton Football Club season. The 1972 VFL season was the 76th season in the Victorian Football League to be contested by the Carlton Football Club, under captain-coach John Nicholls, who assumed the coaching role this season after the departure of dual-premiership coach Ron Barassi at the end of 1971. Carlton won the VFL minor and major premierships, defeating Richmond in the grand final. It was the 11th senior VFL premiership in the club's history. Following the VFL season, Carlton competed in the Championship of Australia tournament, finishing runner-up to the SANFL's North Adelaide. The club then embarked upon a world tour, playing 3 exhibition matches overseas against an Australian All-Stars team. Club summary. The 1972 VFL season was the 76th season of the VFL competition since its inception in 1897, and having competed in every season, it was also the 76th season contested by the Carlton Football Club, as it had been since 1897. The club's home ground was Prince's Park in North Carlton. Additionally, it was standard for all clubs in the league at the time to play 3 or 4 matches per year at the neutral VFL Park in Mulgrave. In addition to its senior team, Carlton fielded teams in both the VFL reserves and under -19s competitions. Senior personnel. George Harris continued as club president through 1972, a position he had held since after the 1964 season. Following the 1971 season, Ron Barassi stepped down as coach. At the time, he left to focus on his business career, although he ultimately returned to VFL coaching at North Melbourne after only a year. Barassi had coached Carlton for 7 seasons and led the team to 2 senior premierships, 1968 and 1970. John Nicholls, who had been captain since mid-1968, took on Barassi's former role to become captain coach. Squad and player statistics for 1972. The following is the final senior squad as announced at the start of the 1972 season. Numbers in parentheses represent games played and goals kicked for Carlton in the 1972 VFL Premiership season. Only supplementary players who played a senior match during the season are listed. Playing list changes. The following summarizes player transfers to and from the club between the conclusion of the 1971 season and the conclusion of the 1972 season. In out. Season summary. Pre-season practice matches. Carlton played 3 practice matches during March 1972, including, as it turned out, matches against both of the teams it would face in grand finals later in the year, Richmond and North Adelaide. Carlton won all 3 practice matches. Home and away season. Carlton finished the home and away season as the minor premiers in 1972, with a win-loss record of 18-3-1. The team set as low as 6th after round 4 with a record of 2-1-1, but lost only 2 of its remaining 18 matches for the season, moving up to and holding first place from round 12 until the end of the season. 2 of Carlton's 3 losses were by fewer than 6 points, a 31-point loss against Richmond in round 14. Despite the strong performance, Carlton was in a constant fight for the minor premiership with Richmond, who finished with a record of 18-4-0. Richmond drew within half a game of Carlton after beating them in round 14. Both teams then won all of their remaining 8 matches, maintaining that half-game margin until the end of the season. Carlton came very close to losing the minor premiership in the final round, eventually beating Footscray by 3 points with the significant assistance of Footscray's inaccurate goal-kicking. Finals series. Under the new McIntyre Final 5, Carlton had a bye in the first week of finals before playing qualifying final winner Richmond in the second semi-final. In a low-scoring match, Carlton held Richmond to only one goal in the first half, but Richmond was able to fight back and level the scores at 8.1361. Alex Jesselenko had an unlikely set shot from 70 after the final siren to attempt to win the game, but did not make the distance. The match was replayed the following weekend, and Carlton suffered its heaviest loss of the season by 41 points. In the preliminary final against St Kilda, Carlton overcome an 11-point halftime deficit to win by 16 points and to progress to the grand final. Entering the grand final, Richmond was the strong favourite, with bookmakers offering odds of 1-2. Richmond had a record of 11-0-1 from its last 12 games and had a record of 3-0-1 in its 4 games against Carlton for the season, including inflicting Carlton's heaviest 2 losses. Some commentators thought Carlton was impressive enough against St Kilda to be a chance at winning, but most tipped Richmond for the premiership. In an unprecedentedly high-scoring game, Carlton kicked 8 goals in the first quarter and 10 in the second quarter to set up a match-winning 45-point lead by half-time, which Richmond never challenged. Carlton ultimately won by 27 points. In a strong display from its forwards, Alex Jesselenko kicked 7 goals, and Robert Walls and John Nicholls kicked 6 each. Championship of Australia. The 1972 Championship of Australia series was played on the weekend following the VFL Grand Final. The tournament was held at the Adelaide Oval, with 2 semi-finals played on the Saturday and the final and third place played on the Sunday. The tournament was contested by the premiers of the 4 state leagues, Carlton VFL, North Adelaide SANFL, East Perth WANFL, and City South from the NTFA, winner of the Tasmanian State Premiership. The prize for the winning team was $10,000. Carlton easily accounted for East Perth in its semi-final, a rough game from which several East Perth players earned suspensions. The grand final against North Adelaide was a close contest. Carlton held a 2-goal lead after 5 minutes of the final quarter, but did not score again, and was overrun by North Adelaide by 1 point. World Tour matches. In October and November, Carlton and a team of all-stars embarked upon a world tour, playing 3 exhibition matches in different countries. The all-stars won the series 2-1. Ladder. Premiership team. The Carlton Premiership 20 was as below. Notable events. World Tour. From 22 October until 13 November, the Carlton team went on a 3-week world tour. The tour was organized during the season by President George Harris. In addition to a busy social calendar, the tour featured 3 exhibition matches between Carlton and a team of all-stars from other senior teams around Australia. When initially organized, the tour was to have featured matches at the Oval in London, UK, on a temporary field in Stuttgart, West Germany, and at Lenin Stadium in Moscow, USSR. However, of these, only the London match went ahead. The Moscow match was abruptly cancelled by the Soviet Union, which cited technical reasons in its communication to the Australian embassy. Harris arranged for the Russian leg of the tour to instead be played in Athens, Greece. The Stuttgart match was then cancelled. When it became apparent that an early winter would render the match unplayable, Harris organized for this leg of the tour to be played in Singapore. The All-Stars team which accompanied Carlton on the tour was announced in July. 22 players were selected, each from a different club. 11 came from the other 11 VFL clubs, 5 came from SANFL clubs, 5 came from WAFL clubs, and 1 came from Tasmania. The first match was played as originally scheduled at the Oval in London. A purpose-built cricket venue, the Oval was an appropriate size and shape for Australian rules football. The hard centre wicket area was covered over with coir mats for the match. The Prince of Wales was in attendance at the match and met with the touring party prior to the game. The match drew a crowd of approximately 9,000 people, almost all of whom were Australian expatriates. Carlton won the match 12.1284 to 10.1878. The second match in Athens was the most bizarre of the tour. The game was played on a soccer pitch, which is both rectangular and significantly smaller than a typical Australian rules football field. To accommodate this, the field for the exhibition match was aligned along the diagonal of the rectangle to maximize its length, and the match was played with 11 players per side instead of 18. This resulted in a high-scoring match, the All-Stars winning 19.13 127 to 19.10 124. Robert Walls kicked 10 goals for Carlton and David Clark kicked 9 for the All-Stars. The attendance of 3,000 was described as being similar in size to that drawn by a midweek soccer match in Athens at the time, and the Greek crowd reportedly supported Carlton because its Guernsey matched the Greek national colours of blue and white. The final match in Singapore was played on a temporary oval field, which was set up on 3 adjacent soccer pitches. The crowd of 8,500 was mostly a mixture of locals and Australian servicemen based in Singapore. The oppressively humid weather was the most significant difficulty with the match, which was won by the All-Stars, 11.1177 to 9.1165. Additionally, laws in Singapore at the time prevented men from wearing long hair, so many players on both teams were forced to have haircuts before the tour. Upon return, Harris announced that the club intended to return to Europe for a second tour in 1973, including another match at the Oval, a rescheduled match in Stuttgart, as well as matches in Wales and Ireland, but the second tour never went ahead. Other notable events, says Greg Kennedy's omission from the grand final team. The most notable absence from the Premiership 20 was that of full forward Greg Kennedy. Kennedy was the club's leading goal kicker for the season and had played 22 matches, but he had kicked only 1 goal in each of the semi-finals against Richmond. In a tactical change, Nicholls shifted Kennedy to 20th man in the preliminary final against St Kilda, and Alex Jesselenko, who had been playing in the midfield throughout the season, returned to his former position at full forward and kicked 7 goals. So when Nicholls adopted the same strategy for the grand final, there was no longer a role in. Kennedy was replaced as 20th man by Gary Crane. Jesselenko kicked 7 goals from full forward in the grand final. Leading goal kickers. Full forward Greg Kennedy was Carlton's leading goal kicker in his first season of VFL football. Aged 22 at the start of the season, Kennedy was zoned to Carlton from Eagle Hawk after he kicked 139 goals and won the Michelson Medal as Bendigo Football League Best and Fairest in 1971. He kicked 76 goals in 22 VFL Premiership matches and a further 3 goals in the Championship of Australia matches. It was the only time that Kennedy led Carlton's goal-kicking in the 3 seasons he spent with the club. Team awards and records. Game records: Round 16, Carlton's second quarter score of 12.072 against Essendon set a new VFL record for the most goals scored in a quarter without scoring a behind. This record still stands as of 2013. It also set a new record for Carlton's highest second quarter score, which stood until 1975. Round 16, Carlton's halftime score of 16.41 against Essendon set a new record as Carlton's highest ever halftime score. This record stood only until this year's grand final. Grand final, Carlton's score of 28.9177 set a new record for the highest score in a grand final. This record still stands as of 2013. Grand final, Carlton's and Richmond's combined score of 50.27327 set a new record as the highest aggregate score ever in any VFL match, grand final or otherwise. This remained the record until 1978. Grand final, Carlton's halftime score of 18.6114 set a new record as Carlton's highest ever halftime score. This record stood until 1982. Individual awards and records. Robert Reynolds Trophy. The Robert Reynolds Trophy for Carlton's senior best and fairest was awarded to Jeff Southby. It was the second consecutive time Southby had won the award, in only his second year at the club. Maurice Melvin Cataggio, who played both under-19s and reserves football for Carlton during the season, was a joint winner of the Maurice Medal for the under-19s league best and fairest. Cataggio polled 23 votes to tie for the award with Ian Kilmartin, North Melbourne. Murray Cup Gary Crane was the winner of the Murray Cup, an award which was, at the time, presented by the league to the player who had polled the most combined votes in the Brownlow Medal Seniors, Gardiner Medal Reserves, and Maurice Medal Under-19s, provided he polled votes in at least two of the different grades. Crane, who played in the reserves while recovering from injury for much of the season, polled 3 Brownlow votes and 10 Gardiner votes to win the award. Representative honours 3 Carlton players represented the winning Victorian team in the 1972 Perth Carnival, which was held from 17 to 24 June at Subiaco Oval during the split round 12 of the VFL season. Alex Jesselenko against Tasmania and South Australia. John Nicholls against Tasmania and South Australia. Jeff Southby against Tasmania, South Australia, and Western Australia. Jesselenko was selected in the All-Australian team at the conclusion of the carnival. Player records. Round 21, Greg Kennedy kicked 12 goals against Hawthorne. It was the most goals in a match by a Carlton player since 1921, when Horry Clover kicked the club record 13 goals. Lower grades. The Carlton Reserves team finished third out of 12 teams, losing in the preliminary final against Hawthorne. After an average start to the season, the Reserves team won its last 8 home and away matches to finish fifth on the ladder with a record of 14-8, only just reaching the final 5. The under-19s failed to reach the final 5. Reserves finals matches. Footnotes. 1. The date of the match is not explicitly stated in the reference. It is assumed that this match was played on Sunday, consistent with the other matches on the tour. However, the Herald did not report on the game until Tuesday, 7 November. References ==